Hey guys, how you doing? I hope you're having a great day. Bit of a curiously dark topic to delve into today, but it's stupid levels of interesting to consider. It's one bigger overarching umbrella topic that seems to dig into four big questions. When did the Android 17 and 18 project begin? When were Lapis and Lazuli kidnapped? Was the orphan camp that Gohan visited in the Saiyan arc where Gero found his victims? And were 17 and 18 being created before Raditz invaded Earth? There's a bunch of questions right there, and a couple you might not have even thought about before. Some of you may have done in the past, because I actually covered this topic once before on my old channel, where I was joined by Real to Real and MJTV for a really deep and awesome discussion on the topic. But I should briefly clarify on what I'm saying in this video. When we talk about this topic, I'm not saying when did Gero start wanting revenge against Goku and start plotting to kill him with androids, because that's obvious. I'm also not saying did Toriyama have this story planned out from the very beginning, because we all know he didn't. What I'm putting forward in this video is what makes sense in the universe itself, so in the story itself, rather than what happened in reality, behind the scenes. But the reason that this topic is so interesting, and the reason I wanted to do this video, is because in the story there is actually a glaringly horrific opportunity where Dr. Gero could begin all of his new experiments for revenge, and it happens right in front of our eyes. I originally pitched my idea to the guys in a call, and I'm just going to chop up and condense the most interesting parts of that video so that you can get the basic idea of it all. But once you've finished the video, please comment down below and let me know whether you guys agree with the theory that I've put across, or whether you think there's another time placement for the kidnapping of Lapis and Lazuli in the Dragon Ball story that actually works better. We're trying to work out where exactly in the timeline that Dr. Gero actually went and kidnapped Android 18 and 17, and to find out where it sort of fits in the Dragon Ball continuity, because it's got to be around somewhere after Goku has defeated the Red Ribbon Army, but it's got to be before Android 17 and 18 can get too old. So I'm going to quickly reel off my theory of how and when I think it likely transpired, and then I'll pass it off to MJ and Mark to receive their thoughts, ideas and criticisms. I think that the only conceivable time and place that it actually could have fitted into the continuity is actually rather creepy, but it makes sense to me anyway. I think the kidnapping of Lapis and Lazuli by Dr. Gero had to happen around the Piccolo Daimao arc, after he'd taken over King's Castle, and made all crime legal and consequently released all prisoners from jail. Now I know that this period of time didn't actually last all that long, but this would have been Dr. Gero's ultimate chance to kidnap victims in order to do cybernetic experiments on them, without causing too many questions and getting too many sets of eyes on himself. Because as we know, he didn't just kidnap 17 and 18, but he also kidnapped many other people. Not to mention, we have to factor in the fact that he would have nabbed people that didn't even successfully become androids, not earning an android number or anything. This being said, and getting back to the point, we now need to work out whether they were kidnapped as children or kidnapped as teenagers, and whether or not they're the same age as when and where they were kidnapped, and whether they age as androids during the experiments. And to work this out logically, we have to look at Toriyama's design for Android 18 in Dragon Ball GT, as this is the biggest significant time lapse that the androids have actually been involved in. This is how we need to notice that Toriyama clearly envisioned the androids aging as time went on, even as artificial humans. And not to mention that Krillin stating multiple times during all the dubs that 18 is literally a human, but just with cyborg updates, implying that she can still have children and live a normal life. This doesn't, however, mean that they're aging at the same pace as everybody else, and we don't know if it's drastic changes in appearances or how long it takes. We don't really have a whole lot to go on other than the fact that we see slight aging over the course of the show, and that we don't see old 17 and 18 in flash forwards and in time skips that they involve Panin as an old lady during Dragon Ball GT. So it's fair to imagine that they age, and that they die as people normally would do. But going on that basis, I think it would make sense that it would have had to have been kids when they were kidnapped, or at least resembling a similar stature to Kid Goku when they were kidnapped by Gero. We see many bike gangs displayed during this free crime period of time in the anime, causing issues on the street, etc. And in the past it's been implied that Toriyama liked to imagine that they were notorious delinquents prior to their kidnapping. So this really would create good reason for them being out and about on the street during this period of time. So this logically is the best, and at least in my mind, the only time frame I think Gero could have actually pulled this all off and kidnapped them. I've talked for quite a long time now, and I want to pass this over to my guests to get their opinions, but Mark, what are your thoughts on the theory I've just relayed?
While it lines up in the timeline, Piccolo Daimao kind of happens almost immediately after Goku single-handedly takes out the Red Ribbon Army, but it's so quick after, and we know that there are so many other androids that he must have made. I mean, taking it into account, like, you know, he got 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. He's obviously making these in some kind of a progression and changing his ideas as he goes. So,
well, we are aware from what was spoken about in the show that basically those little ladybug spy robots were spying on Goku when he fought Ten Shinhan at the 22nd Tenkaichi Budokai. So we know that he was already planning his revenge around that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm not entirely sure, especially since 16 is, you know, in the image of his son, who was lost in the Goku's destruction of the Red Ribbon Army. Or at least that's what I remember.
It's important to note that at the time of this recording for this video, 16 being Gero's son was only a theory at the time. It had never actually been made canon. Sure, it was a widely accepted theory, but nevertheless it was never mentioned within the show itself, so it couldn't be confirmed. With this now being canon, thanks to Dragon Ball Super superhero movie, it actually adds to the plausibility of the theory, because Gero surely would have been so distraught at the loss of both Gebo and Vomi that he would have likely immediately started trying to resurrect or create artificial replicas of them, or to try and get revenge on the person responsible for their deaths, Goku. The tragedy of Dr. Gero here is that because he hadn't had much experience in creating cyborgs at this point, other than, of course, Major Metallotron, etc., who, don't forget, was an android and not an artificial human or a cyborg, he could likely never save them. Hence the reason that ultimately Android 16 is created entirely artificially. He's completely mechanical and was not a cyborg like 17 and 18 later when they find him.
I would say it makes a lot more sense to be sometime during the 5-year time skip from the ending of Dragon Ball into Dragon Ball Z.
A lot of people over the years have asked just how old they are. People have wondered if he kidnapped them when Goku was a kid. So it's interesting. I'm kind of in the middle. I remember reading that people had often thought that they were orphans, you know, going off of the little hospital theory. And I can kind of see that being the case. I've always just been of the assumption, though, that they were captured when they were like kids, you know, like I would say around the age like between 7 to 8, and then they grew, you know, to what they were. I just always kind of assumed that. I never thought so much so that they were babies when they were kidnapped or just exactly how old they were. But I know one of the theories is that they were orphans of the time when he captured them. The time period being, I'm not too sure, but I do think, you know, the Piccolo Daimao stuff is a bit too soon, but I can see your point on that because they were already watching a lot of the earlier tournament stuff, and we already know that Gero was on his route of vengeance during that time period.
Well, you've also got to kind of look at it in a situation of, I don't want to put anybody in the mindset of, okay, you're a child snatcher, think about when the best time to do it is.
Yeah.
But you have kind of got to look at it in the sense that, okay, Piccolo Daimao made all crimes legal. What better opportunity was there for Dr. Gero to go and find as many specimens that he could work on as possible? He wasn't going to get in trouble for it.
Not just children or orphans, but anybody, just, you know, men, adults, whoever, you know, whatever he modeled or whatever he wanted to groom, whatever he wanted to experiment on, you know.
Well, of course. I mean, he still considered 17 and 18 to be failures. He considered Android 19 and 20 to be his successes, and of course, like Cell, ultimately.
Successes in the way that he wanted control of these creatures, but he also wanted to create something that was perfect. I mean, that's what Cell was all about, and like I said, contingency plans after contingency plans. This guy,
supercomputer in his basement.
Yeah, like and depending on what you're learning or what you look at, like he kept trying. If GT is what you're looking at, he kept trying even after death. This guy is very methodical with what he does. He's persistent.
One thing I want to bring up that you guys can't correct me on if I'm wrong. Was it ever stated that they were like criminals or delinquents when he captured them?
That's what Kanji was saying.
So
yeah,
what age
do you, gang or something like
that.
Like
what age do you think they were when he captured them? I know we're talking more so about time periods.
I you know, just to answer the overall question, I really do think that they were the ages that they are now. I think he has slowed down their aging.
But the one thing that you do make a lot of sense on is when you say that if they were supposed to be in a bike gang, then they probably wouldn't be young. They probably wouldn't look like kids. They would probably look like they do currently. But the thing is, Goku, when he's a kid, he's like, 14, and he looks like he's about 5. And this is the recurring theme that, as you were saying, aging is weird in Dragon Ball. But people don't really seem to change the way that they look until they get to about 18, with the exception of Gohan. He was one of the only people who aged seemingly naturally throughout the entire show.
I mean, look at Ten Shinhan, dude. He's looked the same for years, like years.
You know, it does come down to, when you look at it like that, it makes sense that he would have been kidnapped when they were teenagers. We need to underline the fact that even though we refer to them as androids and some people refer to them as cyborgs, they are literally artificial humans. That terminology has been coined because it's supposed to be left open, so if they ever bring in new information in the future, they can sort of say, well, they do age because they're not androids, they're not robots, they're not cyborgs, they're artificial humans. So you don't exactly know what's been changed about them, as much as you know that they've had some weird reactors have been put inside them so they can use infinite energy and bombs, and at the same time...
I think that does make some sense, because it would make sense for them to slow their aging down. You know, it gives them more time to fight and more time to do stuff, you know.
More time to work on them as well.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
That's the same reason that I think you might have abducted them as being like 14, 15-year-olds, where they still might have looked like Goku and Krillin. I think we're all in agreement it probably happened before the Saiyan arc, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It had to have, because they went to Namek and they don't know anything about Namek, right?
So that does make sense, yeah, because of course they would have had to have known otherwise. So, considering the fact I know he was already plotting his revenge against Goku during the 22nd Tenkaichi Budokai, I can only imagine that it still does make sense that as soon as the crime wave was able to be legal, that was the best time for him to go and start doing his kidnapping. So I think I'm probably going to stick with my placement of my timeline ideas, but I appreciate what you guys have been saying, especially with the them being a part of a bike gang and stuff. It doesn't really make too much sense that they would be little kids. But let's be honest, it's not the weirdest thing we'd have seen in Dragon Ball.
No,
I'm pretty sure there's some kids in bike gangs and stuff in Dragon Ball that we actually see during the arc.
What if, and I don't want to get us on another complete tangent, but what if they're part of that, like, child gang cult that Gohan runs into during the training arc for the Saiyans, and, like, that's where they were from? Like,
it's possible in some ways, because I mean, like,
because the oldest kid in that group is a teenager, and how many years go by before, like, 3 years, that would equal out, right? So they're part of that group.
Whilst Toriyama does like to delve deeper into the Red Ribbon lore whenever the opportunity arises, most recently of course making 16 Gero's son, Gebo, officially canon, and making 21 Gero's wife, Vomi, officially canon, this particular topic is something that is unlikely to ever divulge deeper information on unless it's absolutely required for a progression of the story, simply due to the bleak nature of the entire question. So answering this question with a solid theory in a YouTube video is pretty much the best we're going to do until then. But anyway, that about wraps it up. I know it's a creepy topic to dwell on, but it is quite cool to theorise about it, due to the fact that obviously it's quite an important question to go into in terms of universe, about the fact there was such an opportunity for Gero to do such wicked things without fear of repercussions at the time. Let me know in the comments down below where you think it fits in best in a story for him to have kidnapped 17 and 18, and whether or not you agree with this theory. As always guys, thank you for watching. If you did enjoy the video, please remember to give it a thumbs up, and if you'd like more of this content in future, please subscribe, as I'd love to have you along for the ride. So until we meet again guys, bye!